we need to maybe review the context here of Isaiah for a moment. We've been looking at Isaiah for several weeks, and it's always good to get back to the context. Isaiah prophesied at a time when northern Israel was carried away into Assyrian captivity. Southern Israel had not been yet carried away into Babylonian captivity. He prophesied both about the Jews, the southern Jews, being brought into captivity. He prophesied about the Jews, a remnant of the Jews coming back from captivity, from the Babylonian captivity. And I suppose more importantly, he prophesied about the new Israel. Now, the new Israel is the church. It's the era of the Christian community, the Christian era. The new Israel doesn't have real estate, right? The new Israel doesn't have Washington, D.C. as its headquarters. Doesn't have Jerusalem as its headquarters. It doesn't have a Vatican-type, landmass. The church is a lot different than that Zion of old. Now, it's interesting to study about, what's happening or what happened there to Jerusalem after the captivity. It's interesting to note that, Nehemiah, Ezra, they returned with the remnant to Jerusalem. They built the wall, they built the temple, they built the wall of Jerusalem. Those are all interesting kind of narratives, but the thing that we're concerned about is the new Jerusalem, the new Zion. And Isaiah talks a lot about that new Jerusalem, that Zion. And people are so confused about that, the nature of Zion today. Every time I walk in the house, which recently hasn't been very often, the phone's ringing and some solicitor's wanting something, right? So yesterday I was there for a few minutes and I answered the phone, and there's a woman soliciting money for the Jewish community. And I began to talk about, well, that's fine. I'm sure your heart's right about this and all that. I'm sure you're doing what you think you ought to be doing, but, why would I want to support the Jewish community? Why would I want to support something other than the new Zion? That we're baptized into Christ. Now, why would I want to do anything except try to convert the Jews, to Christ? Well, she thought I wasn't a good prospect.
She hung up on you, huh?
We had a nice conversation, but the point is, she was telling me about God's chosen people, and that the Christians have an obligation to help support the poor Jewish people. And I suppose, Mark, when you were over there, you heard some of that sort of thing, a pitch to. Pardon me? many of them are just secular. Yeah, but there are some. Yeah. Anyway, as we study chapter 60 and 61, I try to remember some of the context here. Well, you know, the nation of the civil nation, and Mark, he's an expert on this. He's been over there, but they put a lot of money into armament, you know, and they don't take care of. Maybe they don't have enough money to take care of the poor. Well, I suppose there are a lot of poor Jews. There's a lot of poor Americans, a lot of poor Italians, and a lot of poor everybody, you know. So as we study, as we look at as chapter 59, let's just kind of get a little more context. Chapter 59, Isaiah is addressing the discouraged Jewish community. He's talking about the moral condition of the world, and let's think about that a bit. Jesus came in the fullness of time. Now, what does that mean? In the fullness of time, when the time was precisely right. Okay? He came in the fullness of time. The world was at a low ebb at that time. What did the Hellenistic philosophy, the Greek philosophy, do to improve mankind? Think about it. What did the Roman philosophy do to improve the condition of mankind? The world was in a world of hurt at that time, really in a world of hurt. The Hellenistic philosophy, that is the Greek philosophy, didn't do anything to improve the status of man, to improve the human experience, the human environment. The Romans certainly didn't. That ruthless Roman government didn't do anything to improve the situation with mankind. But it was in this dire darkness that the new regime started. Now, how important was this what we refer to as the Christian era? How important was it to the world? What are some indicators that it's been so incredibly important to mankind? We use the word, or we use the idea of BC and AD, right? Right? Anna Dominica? AD? Before Christ, before the Christian era? Okay? I mean, that he came in the fullness of time. He came at a strategic time. And the world recognized this because our calendar. The world's calendar, well, they have some sub-calendars and all that. But the calendar's based on, it's based on the appearance of Christ coming as the Savior. So, in chapter 59, Isaiah talks a lot about doom and gloom. He talks about the moral condition of the earth, the problems of the earth, and then of mankind. And then in chapter 60, he introduces Zion's brightness, the new Zion's immense wealth, so to speak, the new Zion's prosperity, spiritual prosperity particularly, and the New Zion's crowning glories. And look how he introduces this whole theme here. Arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. Now, could this have been in reference to the remnant coming back to old Jerusalem? Could this have been a description of that situation? And of course, the answer is obviously no. Arise and shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. The glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. The Revelation letter talks about this, the new regime. Galatians 4:26. I want to turn and read just a quick passage there. Galatians 4:26 says, "For it is written," 4:26, "But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all." Now, notice the Jerusalem that is from above. The new Jerusalem, the new Zion, which is from above. In verse 2, "For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness of the people." Now, the world was at a low ebb. The fullness of time, the world was in total darkness, spiritually speaking. I mean, think about it. Did the Jews shed any light? Were the Jews a light to the Gentiles? Were the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, the Herodians, the religious leaders, did they provide any light or guidance for the world? The answer is no. An emphatic no. They were so confused and mixed up and irreligious, although they were very religious. They were just so much in the darkness, and so in verse 2, Isaiah describes how the world would be at that time, and it was at that time in total darkness, and that darkness would pervade the entire world. And gross darkness, and I'll read it, verse 2 again. "For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the people." Mankind, humankind. "But the Lord shall arise upon thee, and his glory shall be seen upon thee." Now, when we think about this a little bit further, how many disciples did Jesus have when he left the earth? 12 special followers, but did he have cast of thousands following him? When real disciples, did he have cast of thousands, millions, or did he have a few? So how do you reconcile what Isaiah is saying here with the fact that Jesus had, just a few followers when he left the earth? Pardon me? Carolyn said that it would eventually he would have those followers. The Gentiles shall come to the light, and the kings to the brightness of their rising. Now, how long was it before a single Gentile entered the church? After the church was established, how long was it before the first Gentile converts, or at least mentioned in the scripture? How long was that? About 10 years. So, this was evolving slowly. The Christian ethic, the Christian religion, the religion of Christ evolved slowly. The Gentiles didn't, but when the Gentiles did start, particularly when the Apostle Paul was in his ministry, what was the nature of who were most attracted to the gospel? Jews or Gentiles? The Gentiles were attracted. In fact, what did the Jews do? What did a lot of the Jews do in terms of Christianity?
They tried to shut it down.
It's a good way of putting it. They tried to shut it down. The leadership of the Jews tried to shut it down. And in Jerusalem, they tried to shut it down. The Apostle Paul tried to shut it down to start with, when he was Saul and before he was converted. He tried to shut it down. When Paul was going about preaching in the Gentile world, where did he get the most resistance? He didn't get the most resistance from the Ephesians, particularly. Now, there were the silversmiths and, the people that were, economically affected by the preaching, where, these guys were making little trinkets and stuff for sale for Diana, the Ephesians, and so forth. They got the heathen temples and so forth. But most of the resistance came from the Jewish community. Now, that's not politically correct, I suppose, to say that in the year 2019 in Columbus, Ohio, but that was the case, that the Jews, to use Nikki's words, tried to shut it down. But, so the Gentiles shall come to thy light, and the kings to the brightness of thy rising. I wonder why he says, well, first of all, the Gentiles come to the light. Of course, Jesus is the light of the world. We have lots of New Testament scripture to talk about that. And the kings to the brightness of thy rising. I wonder why he invokes the kings here. What do the kings have to do with anything in this movement this Christian movement? What did the kings have to do with it? Well, some of you have a King James version of the Bible, don't you? There. Yeah. We know that eventually the ruling classes became associated with the Christian community. We know that at one point during the Roman Empire, Christianity became the official religion, right? Now that it was it was corrupted, it become corrupted. The kings of the earth will see the brightness of it. Then in beginning with the fourth verse there, he makes Isaiah makes a little transition there, and he talks about the great wealth. Now we need to think about this a little bit. He says, "Lift up thine eyes around about and see, and all they that gather themselves together, they shall come to thee, and thy sons shall come from far, and thy daughters shall be nursed at thy side." This glorious kingdom The kingdom that Christ said that the gates of hell shall not prevail against, this glorious kingdom was something to behold by not only the common folks, but by the kings of the earth, the ruling classes of the earth. And then in verse 5, then shalt thou see and flow together, and thine heart shall fear, and be enlarged, because the abundance of the sea shall be converted unto thee, and the forces of the Gentiles shall come unto thee. Now, when he says the forces of the Gentiles shall come unto thee, is he talking about anything militarily there? Is he talking about, would he be talking about all the nations that are coming to the Jewish community and giving them wealth and respect and honor? Well, obviously not, because it never happened in the history of the world. That obviously. So he's talking about something here different than the material. So Isaiah continues that metaphor, that wealth metaphor, in verse 6. The multitude of camels shall cover thee, and the dromedaries of the Midian, and Ephah, all they from Sheba shall come, and they shall bring gold and incense, and they shall show forth the praises of the Lord. And the flocks of Kedar shall be gathered together unto thee. The rams of Nebaioth shall minister unto thee. They shall come upon with acceptance on mine altar. I will glorify the house of my glory. Who are they that fly as a cloud, and as the doves to their windows? Surely the isles shall wait for me, and the ships of Tarshish first, to bring thy sons from far, their silver and their gold with them, unto the name of the Lord thy God, to the Holy One of Israel, because he hath glorified thee. Now, this series of metaphors about all this wealth coming to Zion, this huge event, this huge happening. There's no way that could be applied to the real estate surrounding Jerusalem, or the city of Jerusalem. And so what do all these metaphors, portend? What is Isaiah saying? What is his message? Blessings on old ancient Israel? Ursula says no. He's talking about the kingdom. He's talking about the church. He's talking about Christ as the head of the church, right? Now, how do we, let's just kind of focus on this for a moment. Do we really appreciate the awesomeness? Do we really appreciate the spectacular nature of the church?
Sometimes you have to, me, I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I have to catch myself, because
Pardon me?
You don't focus on it.
Yeah,
Keep that focus on the kingdom.
yeah. I mean, Isaiah portrays this new Zion as something that is totally awesome. And it's in stark contrast to that old Israel, that old Jerusalem, that old Jewish nation. And do we appreciate the awesomeness of the church? And in contemporary times, why aren't there more and more people just flocking to this glorious institution that we call the church? This new Zion. Why aren't there today? Why aren't there people that are just coming in droves like they were in the New Testament era, in the first century era? Okay, Don. What? But just think about it. Would you say that again, Carolyn? Say that again.
There was more teaching done then than there is now about the church.
Okay. Okay. But as Isaiah portrayed this, you would think that there would just be flocks of people coming into the kingdom. But then we have to recognize that there's typically only a remnant. There's typically only a few. Now, why would I say that? How wide is the gate that leads to destruction? It's wide, really wide. How narrow is the gate that leads to life, you see? Yeah, you see? But let's think about, in all these metaphors about, the ships of Tarshish coming in to bring the sons and so forth. What influence? Let's identify some of the influences that Christianity has had on the world. What are some of the influences?
Our nation was founded on the Christian principles.
Okay. But in terms of the social order, what influence has Christianity had on the world?
Everybody's is equal. There are there's no hierarchy. There's no, slaves versus, because we deal with everybody except everyone.
How is this social order different from the Roman? I wonder, in the first century, did they have hospitals? You think it would have had much of any medical institutions?
I doubt this part there is they were.
So think of what influence Christ and his followers have had on the world social order.
Bill, I look at it as the difference in Isaiah 59 and Isaiah 60. They were doing drilling in 59, and the light was shown to them in 60. That was change.
Okay?
You know, they didn't make the changes radically.
But Isaiah is talking primarily focusing on, the future Zion. And continuing these metaphors in verse 10, and the sons of the strangers shall build up thy walls. This can't be talking about Jerusalem after the Jews come back from captivity. The Jews build up their own walls. And the sons of strangers shall build up thy walls, and their kings shall minister unto thee. For in my wrath I smote thee, but in my favor have I had mercy on thee. In this new Zion, different from the old Zion, there would be some semblance, at least, of help from other nations. Obviously, the Gentiles came into the fold of the kingdom. Therefore, thy gates shall be opened continually. He's not talking there about old Jerusalem after the Babylonian captivity, because the gates, Nehemiah closed the gates at night. And they shall not be shut day or night, that men may bring unto thee the strength of the Gentiles, that the kings may be brought. For the nation and the kingdom that will not serve thee shall perish. Yea, those nations shall be utterly wasted. Talking here, about, let's think about this for a moment. What kind of a social order would we have if everybody, if society really operated on the basis of the New Testament principle, the principles laid out in the New Testament? Let's just suppose everyone followed in a particular nation. Let's just suppose everyone followed the New Testament principles. What kind of a social order would we have?
Fantastic.
Would Mark?
No, it would be fantastic if they didn't want to follow. Because that's the problem in our nation now. People don't want to follow moral and godly principles. And so, those that do are haters. And so, if everybody did, then everybody won't.
But theoretically, if everybody did,
Well, that's what I thought you meant.
that's what I did mean.
I want to read something here. So, from Isaiah, my Bible is sending me to Revelation 21:24.
Okay?
And it says, the Lamb is its light, and the nations of those who are saved shall walk in its light. And the kings of the earth bring their glory and honor into it. Its gates shall not be shut at all by day. There shall be no night there, and they shall bring the glory and the honor of the nations into it. But there shall by no means enter in anything that defiles or causes an abomination or lie, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life.
Okay. So, what if our laws, as Ned pointed out a while ago, based on the Christian ethic, but what if everyone, or a vast majority of the people, followed the New Testament principles in it?
It would be smooth sailing.
Huh?
It would be smooth sailing.
Would we have health care? Would we have safety net for those that are in need? Would we have racial harmony?
Yes, yes.
would we need as many police persons as we have? Would we need, it would be a great social order. Now, our nation is in conflict with a lot of other nations, but we have missionaries in nations where the United States government doesn't have good relationships, right? And we have congregations in there are a few congregations in the Arab world, right? You saw some evidence of that. So there are congregations of the Lord's Church in nations where we don't have such good diplomatic relations, So what's that have to do with anything? Well, obviously, if in fact people were following New Testament principles, we could reduce the defense budget a whole lot. You see, Isaiah is giving a description of how the kingdom ought to be, the church, the new Zion.
You were saying how, once Christianity started coming into effect, how things, started to be better. Well, Mel's preached a lesson once, I always get chills when he preaches anyway, but this particular one, he was talking about how, remember Mark, you were talking about how when they started washing their hands, the surgeons, just something that simple, how people stopped dying, and how that is actually, he could probably explain it better than me, like when it all took effect. And it was just something that simple, running water, washing their hands.
Well, Mark,
How
re-preach that so we get the whole picture here. Yeah,
just something that simple.
I mean the whole social order would be different.
It's still going on right now today. The people in the hospitals in our time now, they would go from the morgue to visit their patients and they wouldn't wash their hands and people were dying. They couldn't figure out why. And then they simply washed their hands. And that started way back then.
Verse 13, the glory of Lebanon shall come. He's continuing to use these physical metaphors. The glory of Lebanon shall come unto thee, the fir tree, the pine tree, the box together, to beautify the place of my sanctuary. I will make the place of my feet glorious. When militarily, when the enemies of the Jews came in, they would strip the vegetation, get rid of, it would create a famine situation. And in this new kingdom, all of those things would be good. The sons also of them that afflicted thee shall come bending unto thee. That is, nations the nations would that were obviously accepting the gospel would be appreciative of the fact that the church started in Jerusalem. The word of the Lord came forth out of Jerusalem. And verse 14 continuing, let's read the whole thing. The sons also of them that afflicted thee shall come bending, that is, bowing unto thee. And all they that despise thee shall bow themselves down at the soles of thy feet. And they shall call thee the city of the Lord, the Zion of the Holy One of Israel. And of course, the Holy One of Israel there is the Christ. Whereas thou hast been forsaken and hated, so that no man went through thee, I will make thee an eternal excellency, a joy of many generations. In contrast to how people hated the Jews as a nation, this new kingdom would not be hated by the Gentiles. In fact, the Gentiles make up the dominant part of it. 16, verse 16. Thou shalt also suck the milk of the Gentiles, and shalt suck the breast of the kings, and thou shalt know that I am the Lord, that I, the Lord, am the Savior of thy Redeemer, the mighty one of Jacob. Here, again, identifying how that the church would be perceived. For brass I will bring gold. Here's furthering the contrast. And for iron I will bring silver, and for wood brass, and for stones iron. I will also make thy officers peace, and thine exactors or lawmakers righteous. Talking about in this new situation, there'd be social justice. There would be commonality. There would be peace among those. Violence shall no more be heard in thy land, wasting not destruction within thy borders, but thou shalt call thy walls salvation and the gates praise. Bottom line here is, in this new kingdom, no animosity among races, economic classes, and so forth.